I'll give you for instance. So this is not a cultural thing as much as I think it's really across all cultures. Like something I often tell people as a pastor is when you're visiting people that have lost a loved one, don't feel like you have to say something.
That's good.
Like the ministry of presence for some people in trauma is what they need.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can
That's
say
good, Micah.
you can say a token phrase that you just threw a bomb in the room. And just because you felt the need to say something,
right,
it's better to say nothing than say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So I would say not only be aware of what you're saying and how they're
Mm-hmm.
tracking with you, but sometimes eating your words and not saying something you're going to regret goes a long way.
Come on.
Right? We learned that real quick in a marriage relationship, right?
Yes, sir.
I would rather swallow my words, collect my thoughts, and say something that is productive and helpful than throw out something just because I'm frustrated or feel like I need to say something when I end up saying the wrong thing, and it takes a lot more work to repair the damage I've done than it would have done processing and just waiting and saying less that could actually be a good conversation.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Multi-Ethnic Gospel Approach Podcast, where we cover all things multi-ethnic.
It's the M-E-G-A-B-O-B-C-A-S-T, the Mega Podcast. It's the M-E-G-A-B-O-B-C-A-S-T, Mega Podcast.
What's up, good people? My name is Marcel. I am here on the Mega Podcast Season 3. And, man, we've been having some crazy good times here on the show. And I'm here with my dude, Micah Gaston. I was going to do the little echo thing, but it ain't feel it, man.
That's right. You want to say back?
That works.
Okay, then.
That works. He's been more cultured by the moment, people. So listen, man, we're having a good time here. Mega Podcast. This is the place where we cover all things mega, and we discuss and discover gospel-centered diversity. And so, if this is your first time tuning in, we want you to do us a huge favor. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell so that way you can stay connected to all the content that we release here on the Mega Podcast channel. And also, man, we're just so excited to dive into this next conversation as we just discuss some diversity. So, Micah, I want to go ahead and hand the ball over to you, sir. Boom, it's in your court now. You get to do whatever you will. And, we're just going to start talking. Is that all right?
Sure.
Sure?
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
Let's do it.
I say perfect. He says sure.
Yeah, perfectly
Yes.
sure.
Perfectly, my man. Come on, let's do it.
So let's dive in. So we're really trying to focus in this season and giving handles to people that are asking, great. The Bible clearly teaches that diversity is a God-designed thing, God-given thing. And I feel like I want to live a more diverse life. I want to expand, pop that cultural bubble, and begin to expand my horizons and relationships. How do I do that? And so I want us to talk about today, I think there's a lot of different parts to it, but just to talk about today, what does connecting look like, particularly connecting cross-culturally? And so I'd like us to use a conversation starter that kind of gives people silos of people's life, if you will. It kind of gives them a great place to start. Because I know you and I were talking about this earlier. Not only are we dealing with and helping people in our culture engage, but there's also the issue that so many in our culture have lost the art of conversation. And so with 50% of the population being introverted by their own expression of that, not that that's negative, but it is difficult for people now, I think, more than ever to start some of those conversations.
Yeah.
Particularly difficult ones, right?
Yeah.
Or ones where you're outside of your norm.
For sure.
And so we thought we would just dive into it a little bit and focus on this acrostic or acronym. I always get this confused. Which acrostic or acronym? Forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So family, occupation, relationships, dreams. Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
So the first one there is family. So as you're having conversation with people that you're seeking to get to know them better,
Okay.
a great place to start is family.
Yeah.
We've all got one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Come on, man.
And so it's a great place to start. And so let's say that you and I were sitting down and we're having a conversation, and I'm getting to know you, and I ask you, hey, tell me about your family. What would be the starting place for you that probably would not be the starting place for some, but a good place to start a multi-ethnic conversation?
Well, my first thought when somebody asks me, hey, tell me about your family. Well, I mean, I got sisters, about 5 sisters on my dad's side, and I got 2 brothers on my mom's side, and another sister on my mom's side, and that's my family. Or if you ask me about my immediate family, as far as my wife, my kids, that obviously I got 2 kids. I got a daughter, a son. My wife, been married to for, thank you Jesus, for almost 14 years. Yes, praise the Lord. You know what I'm saying? And so,
Absolutely,
it just depends on how that conversation starts.
Sure.
But that's my first idea. However, depending on the context of that conversation, the parameters surrounding that conversation, if I feel like you're just trying to dig into my personal life, then
Sure.
it could be a little bit, there'll be a guard up, what exactly do you want to know?
Sure.
Kind of thing. And so it could be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think that question just has to be asked a certain way in
Sure.
order for there to be, an appropriate response, because for some people it's like, hey, I got a lot of trauma that I don't want you to know about right now.
Sure.
Because I haven't come to that place of knowing you well enough to give you that type of information. And so there are some things that only people who have been in a relationship with me long enough, or in certain areas of my life, that they have privileged information about my life.
Sure.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, I think that as people, we should have sort of security checkpoints, in our lives.
Yeah.
Where certain people have access that everybody else don't have access
For sure.
to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, depending on how that question is asked to me, that's how I would kind of think through that before I even answer.
Yeah. And so probably a good like you said, guardrails or checkpoints for people would be some things like, probably the first conversation is not about talking about your upbringing.
Yeah.
It would probably be like, do you have any siblings?
Yeah.
Those specific questions of, are you married, single, some of those sort of things that give.
I'm married in Jesus' name.
That's right. That's right. And so maybe some things that tell a little bit about family, whether, spouse or kids, but also, your siblings growing up. So it's not reaching, too far too fast.
Right.
But everybody, by and large can find a connection point in just finding out some about their family growing up,
Yeah, for sure.
And so it's a good on-ramp where everybody can, like you said, in the right way, go in that direction. I think that's probably something else to kind of think about too is, what are some of those things to avoid in this conversation?
Yeah.
So not only, like you said, not getting too personal too quick, but I mean, sometimes those relationships with parents can be strained, can be difficult. So I think being able to ask, those questions that you don't dig into, what does a relationship look like with mom and dad? Is the first thing off the bat, is a good checkpoint or security
because
point.
my
to
answer
keep in
will
mind.
probably be, it's none of your business in Jesus' name.
There you go.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I don't know you like that,
Sure.
And now for some people, it's not a big deal,
Yeah.
for you to ask that question to, but for others, depending on their background, that's a huge, a huge pressure point.
Sure.
For conversation's sake. And so I would definitely agree. That's I don't know why this just came to my mind, but that's a no-no square.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
There you go.
That's a no-no square.
There you go.
So I think you just got to be very careful, of those questions that you ask when you're meeting somebody for the first time.
Sure.
No matter what race they are.
Yeah.
Because we all have our own personal life trauma, situations, disappointments, experiences, and expectations, and all of those things, right?
Yeah.
And so how we ask those questions, what questions we ask, are very important.
Yeah.
And you don't want to, because if I see somebody, watch this, just like your home, right? If a stranger knocks on your door and just tries to enter in, you're going to push them back.
Sure.
And say, how can I help you?
Sure.
If you don't close the door in their face.
Yeah.
So in our personal life through conversation, a lot of times that's what happens with people. Like we come in too soon, or we try to enter that personal space way too soon, and they end up closing the door and wondering like, man, I tried to connect with them. No, but you tried to get too personal too quick. And so they shut the door in your face, or they pushed you back and they got real guarded with you, and they wouldn't let you pass that point. And so just like in the natural, when people when somebody tries to violate your personal space, like your home, then you're going to think very hard before you even give them an invitation into that personal space, even if it's just in the foyer, before they get to your living room or whatever. Yeah, like you're going to think really hard about inviting them in your yard again, like what I mean. Right. And so it's. We have to look at conversations and relationships the same way. Yeah. So as we build them, we're not violating personal space, but we're being invited into that personal space as we build relationship, as we get to know them more, and as they begin to trust us more. Because if we don't, then we run the risk of being shut out of their lives permanently, just because of lack of care and intentionality and understanding. Yeah.
Because trust is earned, right? Trust can't be demanded. And access can be denied, right? So you have to be able to
That's Micah the Revelator right there. That's Micah the Revelator.
And I think that and over the next few episodes, we're going to kind of unpack how do we get to trust. Yeah. And I think that the getting to trust is not like you paint this target on the wall and you start like manipulating or weaving your way towards that. Yeah. It's the fact that you truly want to really love and understand someone that gets you to the point where they trust you because they really know that you value them and you want to know them and understand them in a way that is not washing away those cultural elements or differences, but seeking those different components of it really being a healthy relationship. Yeah.
Man, and even too, just thinking about the concept of connecting, like that is such a digital or electronic term.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
That's true.
And so when we think about connecting on social media, like you follow somebody or you become somebody's friend and they allow you into their personal space online, right? Sure. We get to see the pictures they post. We get to see their attitude and their mood for the day. We get to see their political views. If they're posting that kind of stuff, we get to see their religious views and all of that, right? And so we think that, and our minds get so mixed up that we think in real life that's how that automatically happens. And it doesn't happen like that in real life with real personal connection. Because on the internet, it's just, I'm feeding you what I want you to see, what I want you to know about me. Yeah. I'm not feeding you the things that I don't want you to know. And so through relationship, we begin to know the good, the bad, and the ugly parts of who people are.
That's true.
And I think relationship is the only thing that keeps us bound together, even when we see those parts of people. Sure. Because now we have built a bond that outlasts the ugly parts and the little pieces, that the little nuances and idiosyncrasies that we oftentimes have. And so don't mistake an internet connection for an actual connection.
That's good.
Because they're two different things. Yeah. They're two different things. And a lot of times we think because we have access to somebody on the internet, that we have access to them in real life. Sure. You ever seen somebody, you ever been real good friends with somebody on like on IG or Facebook, and then you get in real life and you can't even have a 2-minute conversation with them? Yeah. Because it's just awkward, or because they don't really know you well enough to have that kind of conversation with you. It's like, oh man, I seen this. Oh, that was cool. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah. That's all you're going to get because you haven't taken any time to build actual relationship. The internet, people, is not real relationships. That's why we can't put all our eggs in that basket. We have to be very, very careful, but also be very intentional with building actual relationships with the people around us.
So you mean all those selfies and those filters aren't like real life?
Oh man, no, man, they're filters.
Oh, okay, well,
they're filtering the real life.
It was all real. I thought that the person that always has their devotional stuff laid out with their coffee at like 9 o'clock, and the proper sections highlighted, like that was all like real, like that's how it always happens.
Yeah, that's probably once a month or something like that.
And dude, just wake up in the morning looking like that, beard all crisp, and but that's not real. Okay, that's good to know.
I got Kevin Hart
makes you feel a little better
in my head. I woke up like this.
Don't do it. So there's a little rabbit trail just for you, just for you. And I think something too. I love how you mentioned a while ago that there are layers to this that are just, they reach every culture, and they just have nuances to them.
Yeah.
And so we think about those different dynamics. So we're in the middle of a pandemic now, but there's been a pandemic long outlasting this one.
Come on.
And that's fatherlessness in our communities, right?
Yeah.
And so you have in some communities that are that face real issues with poverty, generational poverty, addiction, other issues, where fathers are often absentee because of systems and other things in place, and some of those things they're dealing with, where they could be incarcerated or absentee, and the challenges that come with that. And then you have other environments where there's much more privilege and opportunity, where dad is absentee because he's more engaged in work or hobbies.
Yeah.
But either way, he's absentee.
Right.
Either way, mom, grandmother, it's a matriarchal home. They're doing the heavy lifting of parenting. And so I would say that probably the issue of, how's the relationship with your dad probably is not a first conversation piece, by and large, for a lot of people in our culture.
Yeah.
And that no matter what their background is, most likely that could be a very challenging. You talk about trauma, that could be a very traumatic, subject to encounter.
For sure. I know, like me personally, like I have don't have the best relationship with my dad.
Yeah.
When I see him, it's awesome, but like I'm not going to let everybody into how in depth that relationship is or isn't.
Sure.
Just because it's none of your business at this point.
Sure.
We haven't built relationship enough for me to, disclose that information or as much of that information. That's a part of my testimony.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people understand that, hey, I grew up a certain way, but the inner workings and the details of that relationship, it's just something that I'm not going to disclose. And if somebody asks me that I haven't given access to that space, like I may be offended.
Sure.
I think because of where I am personally, like just like maturity wise, like I probably wouldn't be offended right off the bat.
Yeah.
But if I could imagine the younger me or the less compassionate version of myself, man, would be very offended and almost like, how dare you?
Yeah, sure.
Like why would you? Like you see, I don't talk about them, so why are you asking me about them? That kind of thing, And that's another part of building relationships is being observant.
For sure.
Being observant. So, for instance, one of the things, and my wife, man, like my wife will get on me. Like she doesn't like apples, she doesn't like strawberries. But sometimes I'll offer her a strawberry just to see if something changes. She's like, I don't like strawberries. Like what's up? So, but what I'm saying is that like just through relationship, if you see somebody, eating, they have a meal in front of them, right? And they have fruit, they have, maybe some salad, they have a piece of meat, and they have a starch. If you see them eat everything except for the fruit on their plate, then they may not like that fruit. And if every time you see them eat, they're kind of discarding or pushing that back from the rest of their food.
Sure.
And they're leaving that over, they're throwing that away, it probably means they don't like it,
Yeah, sure.
So, and it's just it's up to you to be observant enough to notice things like that as you're trying to build a relationship with people.
Sure.
Because we honor them, it helps us honor them better when we notice the little things that could be really the byproduct of really big things.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, just kind of, I guess that's what I would add to this conversation.
Sure.
Be observant as you're connecting with people, and notice that, hey, this may be a sensitive moment for them, or that may be a sensitive topic for them, and you just gotta honor them by being intentional about how you handle that.
That's right. And 90% of communication is nonverbal, right? So
True.
If you see people tense up, if you see
Right.
their countenance drop, like be aware, self-aware enough to say, to be able to say, you know what, I can see you're not comfortable talking about that, you know.
Yeah.
Because the goal of that we're trying to help people with as we grow in this. I mean, as we seek to grow as brothers in Christ and get to know one another, there would be awareness there to say, I want to understand as you want to open the door for me to understand. You know what I mean?
Right.
And recognizing that is a privilege to be granted, not something to be demanded.
Come on, man.
And so I'd love for us to dive into just a minute, a little bit about occupation. So we talked about family, a little bit of occupation, particularly the multi-ethnic dynamics of that, multicultural dynamics of that.
Yeah.
So I know that you've expressed this in conversation as we've talked, of it being like something that, and maybe ingrained is a good word, maybe, but I know in talking with other friends I have coming from a Black cultural background, have said that often, particularly in the marketplace and professional workspace, they have often felt this pressure, almost like they were carrying the weight of their people group on their shoulders, like in how they perform and how they communicate and how they carry themselves.
Absolutely.
So what dynamics do you feel like that would bring to play as you're getting to know someone and they ask you about, what do you do? Because often we say that, right? It's not like, what do you do for a living? It's like, what do you do? As if you like the whole encapsulation of who Marcel is like his profession, or even, and even I say that often to people. So, So how would you relate to that?
Yeah, man. First of all, I would say it's a ton of pressure, specifically in Black culture, for us to be successful. And what I mean by that is if we reach a certain platform, or if we're invited to a certain platform to, operate our gift, or, our talent, or our skill, or however you want to verbalize that, and we aren't handling that position and that space with care, the possibility of us being demoted or fired or casted out is such a shameful thing, because people in our culture who we're surrounded by, back home, or just kind of in our personal spaces, they're rooting for us and they want us to do well. And it feels like, man, if you make it, then that means we all can make it. There's like a sense of hope in that a lot of times. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but when a lot of times it becomes a very hard thing, and sometimes just unnecessary pressure sometimes, just because we're thinking of all those parameters as we're trying to build relationships, to advance, but as well as stay rooted in who we are in our culture. And so there's so many different levels in that. And so when you start asking us about our occupation, a lot of times, we want to make sure that we are articulate enough to tell you exactly what we can do, or exactly what we do. Exactly what our job, duties are, all of that stuff. But then at the same time, we want to make sure that, we're not embarrassing our culture. And a lot of times there's some occupations that are culturally just frowned upon. Why? I don't know. Why? I have no idea. There's just some things that as Black people, we just, at large, our culture, we just won't do. Like, you're not going to, trying to get a Black person to go pick cotton, you're just not going to do it. It's just not going to happen. Or camping. Or camping. Like, doing certain things, just Black people just not going to do it. And that's at large. So, but there's a pressure there to make sure that, man, you don't get caught in these types of spaces. But if you're over here, like, it's celebrated. And it's kind of a weird kind of thing. But I get it, because when you talk about years and years and generations of oppression and all that stuff, it's like you want to be kind of seen in a better light, in a more respectable light. And a lot of times our culture put that pressure on us as Black people. But it's not just our culture. It's the Hispanic culture. Latino culture, whatever have you. It's Asian cultures. It's Indian cultures. It's a lot of the minority cultures that we know, or that we call minorities in the States currently. That's going to change, America. That's going to change. It's changing now. But like a lot of those other cultures, they experience a lot of the similar weight and pressure to perform, to be great. And so when you talk about that kind of stuff, so like if you're a white person, you're asking a Black person about that, this is your first time meeting them, they won't divulge all that stuff to you initially. They're going to be like, they'll tell you what they do, and they'll keep it moving. But if you start to get to know them and say, hey, man, you're so good at this. Like, what's your story? You ask them that, then if they trust you enough, then they'll begin to open up and tell you, like, man, I came from here, came from this kind of lifestyle. This is what happened. And so this is why it's so important for me to make it and to be successful. And you'll get to understand the why behind the what kind of thing. So, I know that was a mouthful, but
No, man, that's exactly why we wanted to have this conversation, to paint a picture for people that whenever you begin to have this conversation, is you load it onto this, this acronym, that it looks different in a multi-ethnic context, in a context in which the person which you're engaging has a different life experience than you. And it's not saying that one is better than the other, just saying they're different. That often issues of culture are not black or white, they're gray, right? It's just in the middle, and then saying, obviously, that as followers of Jesus, we want to find the win as Jesus defines it. And where our culture bumps up against obeying Jesus, obviously our culture is wrong. But often issues of culture, it's not an issue of right or wrong. It's not an issue of clarity of black or white. It's just different. And so being able to understand those differences and to have conversations that are helpful, that are taking the right steps at the right time, and understanding just a difference of experience as we approach those.
For sure. And I would even say, like, for, those of us who may have felt or may currently even still feel that pressure to perform, like, man, let's redefine our identity based on what God has said about us.
For sure.
Let's redefine our ability to perform based on what God has called us to do.
That's good, man.
And
For
not
sure.
just what our culture expects from us.
That's right.
Because I will tell anybody at any point that I am a Christian before I am black. I understand exactly who I am. Don't get it twisted. I am black through and through. But at the same time, I understand that I have a new nature, and that nature is a God nature. And so I am first subjected to that.
That's
Secondarily, I honor my black culture. And I got a black wife, I got black kids, I got a black family. I'm black through and through, baby. So it just is what it is. And so I will never deny that.
Sure.
But at the same time, I will never be so pro-black. Watch this. I will never be so pro-black that I am anti-kingdom.
That's good.
I have to begin to see myself and see others through the lens of God and not just through the lens of my culture. And so that's just an encouragement for whoever is watching.
For sure.
No matter what race you are, no matter what background you come from, no matter what class you are, you have to begin to see yourself through the lens of the Father.
That's right.
Because if you don't, you will constantly have undue pressure on you to perform, because a lot of the pressures that we often feel and we often put on ourselves, God did not give us those pressures.
That's right.
He did not give us those fears. He did not give us those insecurities to live by.
That's true.
And so we have to we have to ask God to deliver us from those pressures and unnecessary things that weight us down. So,
that's right. And being able to define those terms of kingdom priority is so important, because it's not an issue of superiority, inferiority of white or black culture or Asian or Latino. It's the priority of the kingdom. Like, it's prioritizing that we can celebrate those things that make us diverse in our groupings and our upbringings without making that thing the priority. Like, the kingdom is the priority. So how can we celebrate those things without it becoming the priority? Because that's whenever it becomes really cultural idolatry, right? It's what missiologists call ethnocentrism, right? Like, my culture is the best. And that's whenever it becomes a gospel issue.
That's so good. Anytime you want to any supremacy is sin. So let's just put that out there. Man. White supremacy, black supremacy, whatever supremacy, any supremacy is sin.
Right.
If we don't submit our idea of supremacy to the supreme one, we will always find ourselves in a state of sin.
You're going to preach here in a minute.
I'm sorry, man. I'm very passionate about this. Because, like, that's the thing. We have to submit our idea of what supreme looks like to the supreme one.
Man, that's good.
He's the only one who's supreme. Good. And so if at any point we start to idolize our culture, our background, our community over another, that is something that God did not call us to do. Because Jesus came to reconcile us to one another and reconcile us back to the Father. Hence, love God and love people. And so we can't, you know what I'm saying? It's like we have to understand those dynamics, and like, let's really look at Jesus' life and what he requires of us. So it's just, I'm sorry.
That's good. I love that. I love how you loaded that onto words. That any superiority is idolatry. And we ask to submit our idea of supremacy to the supreme one. I think that's Colossians, right? That's Colossians, right? The supremacy of Jesus, like preeminent over everything, right? Everything falls underneath his feet. Like, he's sovereign. And I think, and if we're honest, no matter what our culture heritage is, we have those issues. And so we just got to again and again bring them back to the gospel, back to Jesus, and say, I've got this issue where I see myself as superior.
Yes, sir.
Help me to reorient that through a gospel lens. To where I see myself as you see me, God, and as you see others. and let that shape how I relate to them.
Yeah.
So talking about about family, about occupation, about supremacy, right? And that. But so let's talk for a minute just about those other couple things that I think are helpful for us to connect with people. So a little bit about recreation, like what do you do that you enjoy that's life giving, to you, and so particularly in a conversation where we're talking with people that come from a different life experience.
Yeah.
What are a couple things to keep in mind that are helpful, and maybe a couple things that could be harmful in that relationship building process? You talk about, those elements of those recreative things, those things we enjoy.
Yeah. I think it's very dangerous to assume that somebody likes a certain thing.
Sure.
Based on how they look.
Sure.
So if you see a slender, black guy, got a little height on him, don't assume he plays basketball, because you will be highly disappointed. It's very possible. You know what I'm saying? If you see a husky black dude, don't assume that he's playing football, because you will be very disappointed in a lot of cases. And so I think that's just one of the things that we have to be mindful of as we're asking people about that. We just can't assume that they like a certain thing because they look a certain way.
That's good, man.
You know what I mean? And so now if you see somebody with tatted up, like, hey man, you like tattoos.
There you go.
That's something I can see.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I'm saying? But don't assume that they like a recreational or they have a certain recreational hobby just because they look a certain way.
Yeah.
I think one of the most embarrassing and demeaning and disrespectful things that I have experienced as a black person is a black guy with long hair, long hair.
I got a long head.
Long head. I really got a circle head. But anywho, it's an onion head. It's just to tell you the truth, I'm jank on myself. But yes, it runs in my family. But anyway, so being a black guy, long hair, and beard and all that, like I'll walk certain neighborhoods and they just assume I smoke. Like I don't smoke.
Yeah.
I don't like it. It's kind of disgusting. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like to me,
yeah,
it's just something I don't do.
Yeah.
Now, and when I address it, I say, hey, I don't smoke. Oh man, you sure? I promise you, yes, I'm sure I don't smoke. Right?
Yeah.
Last time I checked.
Yeah.
So again, I would say more so than anything, I would say don't assume that somebody does a certain thing recreationally,
sure,
just because of how they look. Ask questions. Hey, what do you like to do?
Yeah.
Do you have any hobbies? Are you into sports? Just asking, because I'll tell you an experience that I had recently. So we ordered a refrigerator for our home because our old refrigerator had broke. And so we had a refrigerator delivered and waiting for this guy to deliver our refrigerator, and he knocks on our door. Knock, knock, knock. Open the door. I'm looking at my door. I'm only like 5'8" on a good day, right? And so I look at my door. I'm expecting him to be like, somewhere in that height. This guy is like 7'3".
7'3".
Tall.
That's legit, man.
Like 7'3", and I'm like, yo, he looks like a giant to me.
I mean, technically, he is a giant.
That's just what I'm saying. And so I so ignorantly said, man, you play basketball? Nope, never touched the basketball. Don't even like it. It's like, oh, snap.
So you're saying you're guilty of this sometimes, too?
I'm guilty of it,
Makes me feel better, because I know I'm guilty of it sometimes, too.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, like, but that's one of those things that it's kind of, you got to check yourself.
Sure.
It's like, man, just because, like, we see tall people just expect that, man, you can play basketball.
Yeah.
I don't even like basketball. As a matter of fact, don't want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
It was just kind of a really eye-opening thing. I'm like, man, how many times have I done that to people?
Sure.
And how many times have that happened to me? And it made me think about the questions that I'll ask going forward when I see certain people who have certain statures or whatever have you. It's like, don't assume that they like a certain thing just because they look like they'll be good at it.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Or also just being aware of, assuming that somebody could be bad at something because of a cultural idea,
Right. Yeah.
So there's a flip side of that coin, of not deciding for that person who they are before you, actually dialogue and conversation with them.
For sure.
And I think that for a lot of people, I think are really good. So we talked about, that awareness being a good part of this, not just what you say, but being aware of the receptivity as you say it. I think another important part to this would be for a person as they begin to engage in those conversations to not only be aware of how the person is receiving it, but to be aware of how sometimes we just like to talk, and maybe sometimes a good little moment of silence and processing what I'm saying, what I'm asking. I'll give you for instance. So this is not a cultural thing as much as I think it's really across all cultures. Like something I often tell people as a pastor is when you're visiting people that have lost a loved one, don't feel like you have to say something.
That's good.
Like the ministry of presence for some people in trauma is what they need.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can
That's
say
good, Michael.
you can say a token phrase that you just threw a bomb in the room. And just because you felt the need to say something, it's better to say nothing than say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So I would say not only be aware of what you're saying and how they're tracking with you, but sometimes eating your words and not saying something you're going to regret goes a long way.
Come on.
Right? We learned that real quick in a marriage relationship, right?
Yes, sir.
I would rather swallow my words, collect my thoughts, and say something that is productive and helpful than throw out something just because I'm frustrated or feel like I need to say something when I end up saying the wrong thing, and it takes a lot more work to repair the damage I've done than it would have done processing and just waiting and saying less that could actually be a good conversation. And so I
think that's a beautiful thing, even right there. And I know we're running short on time, but like just words in general, they're very powerful. And so I think knowing when to speak, knowing when not to speak, is very good because a lot of times, but then too, like knowing what to say. Sometimes it's not about trying to tell somebody I understand. But in certain moments, not necessarily relegating this just to grieving process, but just in general. Sometimes we just need to encourage people. Say, hey, man, you're doing a great job. Like, you're killing it. You're crushing it, especially in the occupation, whatever. Like, just find something
that's good, man.
Good to speak life into them. And it will inspire them in ways that you may not see right away. But at least they'll feel some type of confidence, some type of, pride in what they do and who they are even. Because some cultures, in every culture you have a subculture, so that's something to always keep in the front of your mind. Just because you see, somebody black doesn't necessarily mean they grew up in poverty, or doesn't necessarily mean they got, their family is a bunch of thugs, or whatever the stereotype may be. Because that changes depending on how you grew up and all that stuff.
Absolutely.
But like it could be very meaningful for you to encourage somebody and speak life into somebody, and not create damage saying the wrong thing or trying to say something just to fill space.
That's right.
If you speak life to somebody, hey, God got your back. God loves you. Just a simple God loves you. If they feel lonely, if they feel like nobody loves them, we're reminding them that God loves them.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So just using your words to give life where there's space to do that.
I was talking with a pastor friend the other day at breakfast. And he talked about he would just did this recently, like driving in the road. He would just like somebody walk on the sidewalk, roll down the window, and say, "You're awesome." Like, and some people just like received it and smiled immediately. And one guy's like, "Why?" And he's like, "I don't know you, but you're awesome." But I think the point is that we live in a culture of cynicism and negativity. And I think how often you see negative reviews, and how often you see positive reviews. Like we just expect the good thing to happen, to get the right kind of service, to get, to have the positive things happen and the right things happen, but yet we don't often celebrate when they do. So I think just having that intentionality of, like you said, speaking life to people or into people and choosing to, give somebody a pat on the back when they do a good job, celebrate them, celebrate who they are, goes a long way in that affirmation and building not only a relationship, but building that person up.
Yeah,
You know, and the Bible
absolutely.
reinforces that, doesn't it?
Come on, man.
It says that our words that edify, right? That
Yes,
word
sir.
means to build up.
Come on.
You know,
Yeah.
and so I think in these conversations, being able to not only have the dialogue to learn,
Yeah.
but to, as you're having the dialogue, to encourage.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
and I
good.
think occupation, that's part of it. Let's say this is a coworker. You know, of being able to say to them as you ask them things. Obviously, you know what job they do because
Right.
they work with you. Hopefully,
Right.
right? That you know at least what they do in the company, but being able to affirm the giftings you see in them,
Yeah.
the job they do with excellence.
Yeah.
Being able to say, "Hey, I want to celebrate the job you do at this."
Yep.
You know,
Absolutely.
goes a long way in them knowing that you take enough time to notice
Yeah.
and also to speak.
Beautiful thing about all of this, what we've talked about already, is
Sure.
that it's cross-cultural.
Sure.
And, you know, it could be cross-cultural, but it's also intercultural. Like,
Sure.
it's something that you could do within your own, you know, space and personal, you know, family and
For sure.
all that stuff. So it has to start at home, because that's what the Bible talks about.
Sure.
Charity starts at home, and
That's
spreads
right.
abroad, right? But this can also, man, just transcend through multiple races, cultures, you know, ethnicities, all that, and we can be able to build long-lasting, meaningful relationships with other people that don't look like us.
That's right.
And so I think the idea and the whole mission for what Jesus came and lived for is to reconcile us to one another, to reconcile us back to God.
That's right. And we ran out of time. We could talk about, you know, dreams, but and some things to keep in mind and not to keep in mind. So we'll see if we have some time to talk about that next time. But we hope this has been helpful.
Yeah.
Just a good dialogue around, you know, what does that look like of being able to have conversations in a way that grows the relationship in a healthy way. Hopefully avoid some dangers along the way.
Yeah.
And hopefully some good things to do as you pursue those cross-cultural relationships.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, hey, I just want to remind whoever's watching, if this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, follow us so that you can catch all of the content. And listen, we are so excited that you stayed this whole time with us. You've listened, and share the video, share the content, share the podcast if you're just listening to it in your car. Listen, we want to get this resource out to as many people as possible so that you guys can join the conversation. Let us know what you think in the comment area. And yeah, share it, and hit the subscribe button and share it and subscribe and the notification bell and all of that good stuff. Yep. So with that being said, Mega Podcast, we're out. Bang.
Mega Podcast.
Next time on Mega Podcast.
And I think too, another thing that can really be, you talk about perspective, I think another thing that can be an enemy of really understanding is simplistic solutions.
Ooh.
Like I've even seen services where churches have like,
I just want to say this again. Talk that talk. I just want to say it one more time with that. It was good. It was right there.
where I've seen church services where people have like prayed that like this prayer is going to end racism. Like they have actually prayed that prayer in a gathering, like that's going to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And that's going to do away with what has transpired over hundreds of years, hundreds of actions. I mean, just all that's going to go away and it's going to cease to exist because this thing happened in this moment.
Yeah.